Montana State Representative Jerry O'Neill has an interesting idea for how his state can save some money when incarcerating criminals. And so he wants to give them an option. Either you can go to jail, as traditionally has been the case for the last, 5 or 6 decades in most places in the country, or you can choose to instead engage in a little bit of corporal punishment. That's wacky, as I alluded to, I think.
Yes.
I think that it shows a very different orientation towards what incarceration is supposed to accomplish. But anyway, we have some details about what he wants. And so this is a great quote to start it off with. His first quote: "For me, I'd rather be whipped 20 lashes than spend 10 years in prison. Would you rather spend 10 years in prison or be whipped 20 lashes?" Yeah, I think pretty obviously I'd rather get the
Do you know what this
lashes.
reminded me of? It reminded me of, remember it must have been 10, 15, probably 20 years ago, the whole thing with caning in Singapore? Right.
Yeah.
To me, that was the first thing I thought of when I heard this story. The second thing I thought of was, wow, I used to live in Montana. I reported on the legislature up in Montana, and it may be surprising to some people, but I'm not surprised that
you
this
felt
came
it sort
up in
of
Montana.
brewing under the surface?
Oh yeah, I mean the Montana's a very law and order, tough on crime kind of place. I mean, that's the politics of the place. So it doesn't surprise me that a state legislator would say, well, you know what? Instead, if we got a prison problem, instead of dealing with it in a humane way, in a way that says let's look at our laws and see if we're incarcerating, let's say, people on drug possession charges.
Exactly.
Instead, we get a proposal that say, well, to deal with the prison problem, we'll just beat the crap out of people.
Yeah, we'll cane them, we'll whip them, something like that. I think that has some dark racial undertones, considering the history of the country.
Now, I would say this. Well, I'll ask you the question. Which choice would you take? The time in prison or the lashes?
10 years or 20 lashes?
10 years, I'm going with 20 lashes.
I don't care how many lashes it is. There's no way I would give 6 months of my life.
Okay, so then...
The physical pain I'll get over in a couple weeks.
So here's what's weird about this story, because I agree with you. I looked at this and I said, this is a crazy idea. But then I also said, well, you know what? Is it as crazy if I would take the 20 lashes instead of the 10 years?
Well, I think that it's crazy both because I think it would be ineffective in actually dealing with the criminals.
I agree with.
You're going to let a rapist get off with 20 lashes as opposed to actually paying, in hard time. I don't think that that's a good idea. It's more about, I think, the underlying political and psychological mindset that it reveals that this man has. I mean, you made the comparison to Singapore, and I think that's a great comparison. I think the same sort of, no, it's straight up, it's authoritarian personality.
And I think it's a reminder that as much as we call our criminal justice system correctional facilities, that clearly the legislators, or some legislators who are supposedly making policy over our correctional facilities, don't really see our criminal justice system as anything dealing with correction. Remember, correction is like, we're gonna help
Fix
you,
the
we're gonna
problem.
reform you, we're gonna help you deal with problems. I don't think 20 lashes helps correct somebody.
I don't think that's the goal at all.
Right.
Let's hear a little bit more about why he thinks this is okay, but then I would love to talk about sort of the different ideas that liberals and conservatives have in terms of the goals of incarceration. But many of you might hear about his plan, which he says, by the way, would actually be more humane. It would stop the torture that is, being incarcerated for many years, which I imagine actually would be a torture. But he says he noted that his bill would be constitutional, in case you're wondering about that, because those opting for corporal punishment would have to agree to the practice. He compares it to plea agreements, saying when people enter into plea agreements, they agree to waive certain constitutional rights, including the right to appeal. Some historical information for you. It has been more than 60 years since the last case of a corporal punishment sentence in the United States, which was a public whipping of a convicted criminal in Delaware in 1952, although even Delaware repealed its whipping law in 1972. And to give you a bit more details about how he thinks this would actually be administered, options would likely include caning, whipping, and paddling, which sounds like 50 Shades of Grey, but under the bill, the punishment would be administered by either a county sheriff or the state corrections department. And I have to imagine that if this was actually put into practice, that would attract some interesting people to the position.
Yeah, I mean, you'd wonder who would it attract. I'm a little bit
Sadists,
afraid.
I would imagine.
It's a little creepy.
Yeah.
It also reminded me of Animal House, or
I never
the fraternity,
Animal House.
or Dazed and
But
Confused.
exactly, yeah. JR was making the comparison to the paddling that frat brothers have.
That's right.
Yeah, I don't know. If you're a rapist, I don't think that hazing is enough. But you brought up the point about what the goal is, and obviously they just want to punish people. Now, every way that you would deal with a murderer or a rapist is going to be punishment of a sort, but I think that liberals naturally have much more interest in trying to reform the criminal. And I honestly, look, I don't know State Rep Jerry O'Neill. I've only seen him in the news for this, but I have a feeling that he doesn't care much about reforming criminals.
I think that's the bottom line here. Is how do you think about crime in America and the criminal justice system? Is it about rehabilitation and correction, or is it about punishment, punitive punishment, revenge? And I guess the theory, what? The theory is that knowing that a system is punitive, it'll be a deterrent. But
I guess.
But that hasn't.
And we, in the beginning,
out.
said that we would prefer this. So obviously it's less of a deterrent than the 10 years in prison.
Exactly.